Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's YouTube video where I'm going to be talking about the home buying process in the GTA, what it takes to buy your first home, the steps that you need to take, and some tips and tricks that I recommend with all the experience that I have helping plenty of buyers and first time home buyers in the Toronto real estate market. So, first things first, right? You decide that you want to buy a property, maybe you've been shopping around. First of all, the number one place I can recommend to look for a property that you're looking to buy is realtor.ca. Realtor.ca has all of the listings that you're looking for in the Toronto real estate market. If you are looking for comparative sold prices, this is not a sponsored video. I could recommend House Sigma. A lot of the clients that I talk to are using House Sigma because not only does it show sold prices, it can also show you if they've listed it before, when it last sold. It has a plenty of data and the interface is very, very good. I like it as well. So step number one is you kind of want to have an idea of where you want to buy and what you want to buy. So how do I tell people to go about it? So, some of the things I tell people, hey, maybe you want to live closer to work. Maybe you want to live closer to your family. Maybe you want to consider somewhere that's not too far, but is within your budget. Because if you buy somewhere that's a little bit farther, you can get it for cheaper. You know, sometimes you want convenience. Sometimes you want to be by the subway. Sometimes you want a specific neighborhood or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's the area that you grew up in. Sometimes you're strictly looking for an investment. Maybe you're looking for an investment near a school. Sometimes you're looking for a condo. You want a condo with certain amenities or built in a certain year or close to a certain. First things first is look into the areas that you want to move into. In the greater Toronto area, if we look at the GTA map, right? There's Durham region, there's City of Toronto, there's York region, there's Peel region. These are the main regions in the Toronto GTA market. And within these regions, you have different sub cities within these regions. And in all cities, can vary more or less. Some cities within a region are cheaper than others, and so you kind of want to get an idea of, first of all, which region you want to live in. Do you want to live in Durham region, Peel region? And I'm assuming if you're a buyer, you already know this step. Next is you want to get a pre-approval. Okay, the reason why you want to get a pre-approval is because I've had plenty of times where I would go around showing houses to clients, and they might see properties that they like. They might think that they can, maybe afford this property, or they might see a property that they like and they think they can't afford that property, and they're not even aware that whether they can or not until it comes time to put an offer. And we go through the process of putting an offer after showing houses and seeing houses for 30 to 60 days, and we finally put an offer, and we realize that whether they can or they can't get a house because the mortgage broker has told them, hey, this is too expensive, it's out of your budget, or they feel like, oh, you could have bought for this much, or they would have probably preferred another house that they saw. And this is something that I used to see earlier on in my career. I've been a real estate agent since 2016, so I don't let that happen anymore. However, this is the process that I'm trying to explain, is getting a pre-approval and maybe talking to a mortgage broker, not necessarily going and doing a credit check. I don't recommend going and doing a credit check, but based on your income and the Equifax report that you can get for free, you can see how much you can afford. And this way, you'll know exactly how much you should be looking for. And we know, for example, you can buy up until this much. Then we can see all properties that have sold in the area that you're looking for in this range, and those are the ones that you will focus on, right? When you're more focused on the type of property that you know you can get and that you know you should be getting, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get a better deal than the next person that's just shopping around, maybe sending an offer here, sending an offer there. No, if you have a good target of where you want to buy and what to buy, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get the ideal home that you're looking for. Okay, so once you get the pre-approval, and once you know exactly how much you can afford, and most people, what they look at, in my experience, is they look at price, they look at a number or how much down payment they have. I think the number one indicator that people should be looking at is how much is their monthly payment. So if your gross annual income is, say, $150,000 as a family or $200,000 as a family, after tax you're taking home however much, and every month you want to put aside $3,000 a month towards your mortgage. So that's your budget, $3,000 a month. You want your you want your bills, you want your mortgage, your property tax, all of this to fall within $3,000. Okay. At that point, the best thing to do to figure out how much you can afford by speaking to a mortgage broker and telling them, hey, this is how much down payment we have. How much of a house could we afford to buy to make my monthly payment only this amount? 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, whatever the amount is, right? That's what I think personally is the best financial way to purchase a home. By buying a home based off of today's interest rates, how much down payment you have, okay, how much will my monthly payment be? How much should the price have to be for the home I purchase so that my monthly payment is this desired amount? I think that is the smartest way to go about finding a home to purchase in the Greater Toronto Area where prices are clearly inflated. And this is a crazy market that we have seen for the last 10 years. And from my experience, this is the best financial way because even when the market's volatile, whether it goes up and down, you never over leverage. And the problem I see is with people over leveraging. And as the prices might go up or down, if your income doesn't rise or if you don't have a business, then it's best to just buy within a certain monthly budget and you'll be better off in the long term. Once you have that figured out, everything else is absolutely easy. Going around showing homes, putting in offers. I've noticed that in my experience, within a 30-day period, all the buyers that I have shown properties to, we pretty much see all the property types that are on the market. One thing I do notice for a property is it will never be 100% perfect. I've never had a person buy a house say it's 100% perfect. It might be 90% perfect. It might be 95% perfect. It's never going to be 100% perfect for you at the time. And that's just a buyer bias. Once you move in, you can make it more perfect to you, and you're going to realize how much of a perfect home it is to you. Especially first time home buyers or people that, they're buying their second home or whatever. I think this doesn't happen with seasoned investors because they don't fall in love with the small details. But they, first time home buyers or people that are buying their second home, they look at a lot of the small details and they think like this is the end all be all, and that's not the case in my opinion. I think that a lot of these small minor things will can be not just overlooked, can be fixed, and there's probably a lot more benefits that you can probably getting out of a specific house that you shouldn't let a small thing deter you. And everybody's different. I'm not saying that you know you can't get the perfect home. But in my opinion, it's always 95 or 99%. There's always that 1% that you might not like and think it's the end all be all. If you've been shopping for a house for over a month or 2 months and you've seen pretty much all the properties on the market, then it's probably not a property problem. Whenever I'm buying a property, I've bought and sold over 5 times. So whenever I'm buying and selling a property, the property that you actually want at the moment, you might feel that you're overpaying by 10 or 20,000. Or if you're selling a property, you're gonna feel like you could have gotten an extra 10 or 20,000 more in the big picture. That 10 or 20,000 more is not relevant because in the big picture, like I can give you an example. Like there's one time where I sold a property for $970,000 and I thought I can get $985,000. And I asked a friend of mine who was also a real estate agent if I should sell it. He said, obviously, it's a good price. It's pretty much almost what you want. And then it's pretty much is. 1.5 years later, that property is worth $150,000 less. Imagine I didn't take that offer because I thought I can get an extra $15,000. Or another example is when I bought up my first property was a condo in downtown Toronto. It had a nice CN Tower view. It was in 30 grand trunk, and the view was amazing. And the price of the property was $10,000 more than the highest sold price in that building for the same exact unit. But this unit has a specific view, which I thought was amazing. And this view, at the time, I was paying ten. I felt like I was paying $10,000 more for the property, but I kind of understood this concept. I'm like, I was willing to pay whatever at that point. But looking back, I sold that property for $120,000 more than when I bought it, and I probably would have lost out on it if I was trying to cheap out on over $10,000. You have to understand something in the real estate market. There's going to be an up and down variance of approximately $10,000 to $30,000 on the house that you possibly want, which you might feel in the moment that because it's going to be hard to think logically. This is why you hire a professional. You don't hire a professional real estate agent to do some paperwork and just tell you to do A, B, C. You tell them to guide you through the tough decisions in the market and think logically. This is exactly what people, and this can save you and cost you more than 100,000. Yeah, sometimes I've seen up to $400,000 if we're taking the wrong advice from the wrong person. Okay, I'm going to be making a video on this another day about that. But yeah, back to the process of buying a home. So you've got your pre-approval. You know how much you want to pay monthly. You know which areas you want to be looking at, and you know what to look for. I also tell clients, hey, you either want to live closer to the highway so you can save time traveling, live closer to family, or closer to work. Or if you like living in outskirts, you want a big piece of land, you can also do that as well. Or you're looking for a pure investment, maybe you want to live near a school, up and coming businesses, whatever the case may be, high traffic area. There's a few criteria that you can look at when it comes to buying your first home. Now, I didn't go into the types of properties that a first time home buyer or investor would buy. That would be a video for another day. But obviously, there's the condos where you have the apartment buildings with maintenance fees, and you have the condo townhouses and condo freehold detached, and then you have the freehold properties, right, like detached and townhomes. And then you have multiplex, multi units that are legally registered that are allowed to be rented out. These are the different types of properties that you want. You can also, most people that are just looking for a home within their budget, whether it's a condo, a townhome, or a detached, whatever the case may be. So what do I do? You know, in that sense, what I feel like what I do is I give you the best logical advice based on all the experience and on the transactions I've done, and I try to put myself in your shoes and make you and do the best decision for you, right? If you're looking at a house, I might try to tell you you know where you might get a better opportunity, what might be wrong with this house, try to negotiate better on the deal for you, try to make the process so much easier for you with contacting the home appraiser, the home inspector, the lawyer, the mortgage broker, making sure everything is checked out on the property, making sure everything is good. This is exactly what I do, showing the properties for you at the time that you want to see it. So for example, you want to see 10 houses on the weekend, I make sure that, I try to show all the properties to you in a timely manner. So it's saving you time as much as possible, making sure that I'm not showing you a property that's, that you might not, might regret seeing for whatever reason. This is pretty much what a real estate agent does, and this is what I help you do. Make you make a decision that's going to make your life easier and better at the end of the day. So now you found a house that you like. What would be the next step? The next step would be to make an offer. So we prepare an offer. There's a few things that you need to put in mind. First of all, the price that you want to start off with. Just because a house is listed at a certain price, we would sit down and I would go through all the comparable sold properties. So sometimes people underprice a property, they want to sell it over asking. Sometimes people want to, they price it high, thinking low, or sometimes people price it right on the money. Just looking at a number strictly for what it's listed at can tell a few different stories. And it's my job and a real estate agent's job to tell you what they think professionally would be the correct price for this property, more or less. No one's spot on. More or less, what should be the price based on comparables? If there's not many comparables, how do we come up with a conclusion, bringing in all the facts and coming up with a final number, right? But that doesn't mean that final number is where you start, because you never know the seller on the other end. Maybe they're willing to take less, maybe they want more, maybe they're greedy, maybe they're reasonable, maybe they price it exactly and they're firm. You would never know exactly for sure, but you always want to start off where you feel comfortable. Okay, and certain things can determine how you would go about the situation. If we're in a hot market where there's like 10 people bidding, you want to be a bit more aggressive with your price, especially if it's a house you want to live next to your mother-in-law, they live right across the street. Hey, somebody's going to be willing to pay over $30,000. If that's what you're competing against, or whether that's you have to think about a few factors and what's that worth to you in the long term. So when making an offer, you have the price, then you have the closing date. Average closing date typically goes between 30 to 60 days. I've had closing dates up until 6 months. The longest closing date I've seen for a resale property is 6 months. And this was in the seller's market. So the seller had the leverage at that point. But average closing days usually about 45 to 90 days. And this is totally normal. It gives you about 45 to 90 days to get everything in order, get your mortgage, get your paperwork, get the remaining of the down payment, and get ready to move in and either vacate your existing spot or whatever the case may be. Okay, so once you have the purchase price for the initial offer that you want to send in for the price, you have the closing date. The next thing you want to do is how much of a deposit. Now, the average deposit usually around 5% of the property, but sometimes you can get away with 2% to 3%. Now, just because you have a higher down payment does not make you necessarily a strong buyer, but it does indicate financial strength. So for somebody that's willing to put $100,000, or just say they're willing to put down 10% as a deposit, and a deposit, say you put in an offer and they accept it within 24 hours, within one business day, you have to deposit a draft for the property. It sits in the brokerage's trust account until closing, which goes towards your down payment. If it's a firm offer and if the seller sees that you put maybe 10% down or 10% deposit, and it's a firm offer and they know that you can't just walk away, so it kind of does show financial strength. However, I've bought properties for for clients where they put only $5,000 down on, say, a $400,000 house, and they close and everything was just fine. It all depends. It depends on the situation. If you're competing against multiple people and there's other people on that are competing for the same house, then it might be better to put a higher deposit. Instead of, if you're putting 15 grand, putting 35 grand might help. If you're putting 50 grand, maybe putting 80 grand might help, or $100,000. It just depends on the situation in the house that you're looking at, and if there's competing offers, the market that we're in. But overall, when it comes to buying a home, if you do get an accepted offer, you will have to make a deposit within one business day into the broker's trust account. Okay. Now, next thing is, when you're making an offer, you ideally give them a irrevocable time. So meaning that, say we send an offer today at 12 p.m., we want to hear back from them at a certain time. However, we don't want the offer valid forever. We want it to expire. So legally, it can expire after a certain time. Usually, we give them this. If we send it, say I send it by afternoon on a day, I can give them until midnight today, or I give them until the afternoon the next day. Sometimes if we send it till midnight tonight, or later in the night, sometimes I send offers as late as 10 p.m. I'd give them until the following day, midnight, to get back to us. And after that, this offer is no longer legally valid. Sometimes what agents do is, if they have an offer from you, they can kind of leverage it to get other offers from other people that were interested in the property. So you can kind of create a sense of urgency. If it's a buyer's market and you really want to get a house, and you have multiple options, you can say, hey, I'm only giving you 6 hours to get back to me, or I'm going to buy this other house, right? That's usually not the case. Usually, the main thing I've seen people use this for is just to leverage it to try to get other offers. So you don't want to give them 3 days to go shopping around, like, hey, look, I have an offer on my house. Anybody want to beat it? Like, no, like, I'm giving you till tonight. If you think you want to, you get back to me, get back to me. So sometimes they'll counter offer back to you. Okay, so then you have the irrevocable date. Okay, next thing you have is the conditions. Normally, the conditions will be financing condition and home inspection condition, which means within 5 business days, you have an opportunity to cancel the deal if you're not satisfied with the home inspector, and if you're not able to secure financing, you're able to get your deposit back in full, and the offer is null and void. So this is in respect to the benefit of the buyer, right? If you send a conditional offer on home inspection or finance, sometimes people just do home inspection or they just do finance, whatever the case. Sometimes in a slow market, they might ask for 7 business days instead of 5. In a seller's market, sometimes people have no conditional offers, and they're just putting a firm offer, meaning if they accept this and I put my deposit, I'm not able to get my deposit back, right? It just depends on the market conditions we're in. And then in general, there's a whole bunch of other conditions as well. It's not conditional, but it's just in terms and services. Like, for example, you're going to keep the house clean, make sure that it wasn't used for growth, all the zoning, everything in compliance, standard clauses that we put in the offer. And this is something I will go through with you when we put an offer. It's general, you can read it all over. It's the same on every offer. Um, but however, the main thing that comes down is the finance and home inspection condition. And if there's, and then say, for example, you put a home inspection condition, and then you go to a home inspector, and then the home inspector tells you, hey, this thing is broken, that thing is broken, this thing is leaking. If you, as long as you don't see anything major, the minor stuff you can always negotiate. Say, hey, I'm willing to waive the home inspection. as long as you guys are willing to fix A, B, and C. And then if they agree to it, they'll sign on it, and then by closing date, they'll have to fulfill that condition to you. But at that point, it's firm, right? If you say, hey, you have to fix this, and by closing date, if you don't fix it, boom, whatever. But usually it's nothing like that. You're just trying to see if there's anything major. Major meaning there's no foundational breaks, there's no major leaks. You don't have to repair the roof for $15,000, right? That's mainly what we're looking for when we're sending an offer, conditional on home inspection. So now we have the price that we want to first start our offer with. We know our closing date. We know how much deposit we're going to put. We know when we're going to give the irrevocable until when we want to hear back. And then we're going to put the conditions, or we're not going to put conditions firm, depending on the market and depending on the property and depending on the situation. Every time it's different, right? So that's pretty much the entire process. You find out where you want to buy, what you want to buy, how much you can buy for, and you go look for properties that you want to buy, and then we go put an offer based on all the things I just explained. Once that is done, the next step is you get a firm offer. Now you know, okay, this is the house we're buying. What comes next now? So now you know you're closing. Now you have 60 days to close on the property. Okay. So what do we do now? We have to provide all the documents to the lawyers, make sure the financing is in order, provide everything to the mortgage agent, have all the funds ready to close on final closing date. Some closing costs that you need to be aware of, for example, is land transfer tax. So there's a land transfer tax in Ontario. Anytime you buy a property, there's a one-time tax you have to pay. If you're buying in the Toronto region, it's double tax. If it's outside the Toronto region, it's a single tax. And you can find these tax calculators on my website, opedia.ca. It's linked in the description. And if you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe for more. I'm going to be dropping videos regularly and talking about my experience and giving you as much value as I can. Be prepared for the land transfer cost. There's going to be a lawyer fee. Lawyer fees can range anywhere from $800 to $1,500 for buying a property, right? Then you have a few minor things that you should budget for on the closing date. So, for example, one example should be, say you're buying a property and it's April, but the person that's selling the property has paid the entire property tax for the entire year for say $5,000, right? They've already paid ahead of time. Some people are like that. So on the day of closing, you would have to reimburse them for from April to December, whatever they paid, you had to reimburse them back, and that will be adjusted in the final closing. It's minor things like this, whether it could be a rental unit, or it could be property tax, or it could be maintenance fees, or if it's a maintenance fee property, it's not that much. It's like you should probably budget a few thousand more or less, and then you have your closing costs, um, land transfer tax, and the lawyer fees, and that's pretty much it. And then the remaining of your deposit, of course, right? So if you put down 25,000, but your entire deposit is 100,000, you have to bring the remainder 75 plus the land transfer tax plus the closing costs plus the real estate fees, which can add range up to maybe another few $1,000s. Land transfer tax, depending on the proper price, it can range anywhere between $8 to $20,000 depending on where you're buying, maybe more or less. If you're a first-time home buyer, however, there is a discount to buying a home in the land transfer tax. I believe you get $4,000 off every time you buy your first home. You get $4,000 discount when you're buying your home in the GTA. So this is the number one concern that I see people have when they're buying a home, especially if they're selling an existing home and then they're buying another home, is how does the transition look? So say you have to sell your existing home to buy your other home, you're going to have this limbo period where you're going to give away the keys to your house, but you don't have the keys to your new house yet. Usually we try to make it happen on the same day, and maybe we give you a free storage room or use a storage room, or we hire a truck, moving trucks where they hold on to your luggage and your items for the entire course of the day. This is normal, and maybe pay a few extra $100, they hold it down, and then once you get the keys, they'll bring everything over. So maybe you're going to be 4 or 5 hours in limbo. You go have a nice restaurant, maybe go sit by a lawyer's office, have a coffee, or come to my real estate office. We just hang out and wait until the closing. Okay, I'm being serious. And then next thing would be, if you're a first time home buyer and you're renting, or you're coming from another spot, living with family, you don't have to move in right away. Obviously, you have a bit more flexibility. So if you are, for example, renting a spot and you want to give notice, I would suggest about 2 weeks. You never know what can happen. Give them about 2 weeks extra notice. Say you're closing on September 10th, maybe you want to give a vacant notice that you're leaving on September 24th. You want to give yourself the extra 2 week buffer period, not only to move all your stuff over, to make sure sometimes closings don't go as smooth. Sometimes they do go smooth. It depends on the situation. Maybe a 3 day buffer is more than enough. I might be exaggerating for an extra 2 weeks. And maybe you're working a full-time job, you don't have enough time to be moving back and forth too much. You want to use the weekends as much as you can, and some days after work you can give yourself that buffer, right? Especially because you have the leverage at that point. And yeah, that's pretty much the process of buying a home from beginning to end. Pretty quite simple. We try to make it as easy and smooth as possible for you. And this is for resale property. Obviously, if you're buying a pre-construction, then it's a bit different. We'll make another video on that another day. If you have any questions about buying a home, or you're thinking about buying a home or selling a home, please feel free to call me, and please visit my website to see any properties in the GTA that are for sale. It's linked in the description. See you guys next time.